What up, y'all? Pretty Beggar here for part 2 of my video series on how to broadcast high quality, high definition live stream from your quarantine digs. This series is primarily targeted at musicians, but can apply to anyone YouTubing, gaming, blogging, podcasting, etc. This episode is all about audio, mainly how to give you some freedom to use multiple instruments or other audio sources and how to mix them together to feed them into your live stream. This whole process can be broken down into 3 basic steps. Number 1, getting all your instruments and audio sources plugged in and transmitting signal. Number 2, digitizing that signal and sending it to your computer. And number 3, uploading it via stream to the internet. So I'm going to outline a basic workflow, but much like yesterday, the back half of this video, I'll go into the minutia of my personal rig and some more advanced techniques for setting this up. Once again, any products that I mentioned in the video, I will try to link down below in the description. So step 1, hooking up your audio. For this, you'll need a device that's capable of receiving XLR and or 1/4 inch inputs. So 1/4 inch, your typical guitar instrument cable, XLR, your typical microphone cable. The 3 most common devices that will do this are mixers, audio interfaces, and digital mixers, which are essentially a hybrid of the 2. So let me define those real quick so we can all start on the same page. Mixers are built to take in several inputs and give you maximum control for where you send, receive, blend, and split those signals, hence the name mixer. So these are ultra flexible if you have a lot of instruments and audio sources to account for. Analog mixers are typically built to take in instruments and send signal out to speakers to amplify them, and digital mixers do the same thing, but they're capable of interfacing with your computer. Audio interfaces are sort of the opposite to an analog mixer. They're typically built to take in a small number of inputs, amplify them with clean, great sounding preamps, and convert that analog signal into a digital format to be able to send that to your computer via USB. Now, for reasons we'll get into later, if you're planning on live streaming, I would suggest that you get an audio interface that has at least 2 more input channels on it than you need for all of your instruments. We essentially want to leave 2 channels open to send your finished stereo signal through later on down the line. Now, these extra channels are a luxury, not a necessity. So if you already bought an audio interface or digital mixer without some extra channels, don't worry, I'll show you how to get the most out of that setup as well. So finally, digital mixers. These are my personal favorite. They perform the functions of an analog mixer and an audio interface simultaneously. They come at a higher price to an analog mixer or an audio interface, but again, they're doing both functions. So depending on what you go for, you might be able to find a digital mixer that's the same price or cheaper as buying those 2 pieces separately. In my opinion, it's totally worth it for the simplicity and the flexibility for all situations. Some notable models of digital mixers are the Behringer and Midas X series and the QSC Touch Mix. Both I will link in the description. I use a Behringer XR18, which I'll mention now because you might see that name or label pop up in menus throughout the video. So let's cover the various scenarios that you might be facing at home with your existing gear. If you have an analog mixer and an audio interface, great. We'll mix all the instruments in the analog mixer. We'll use the audio interface to digitize the signal and send it to your computer, and then we'll throw it on the internet. If you only have an analog mixer, unfortunately, you will need to get some form of an analog to digital converter or ADC. Audio interfaces are the most ideal piece of gear for this, but if you're on a tight budget, like many of us are these days, you can save money and go with a really bare bones analog to digital converter, and I'll list a couple of those down in the description. And if you have a fully digital mixer, this will be smooth sailing. Okay, so now that we've summarized the gear that you need, I'm gonna jump way ahead in the signal chain to our live streaming audio feed. Streaming audio and video to the various internet platforms is the least flexible and most bottlenecked part of live streaming. So we're gonna start there and work backwards so we can be sensitive to these restrictions. Now, I would recommend using a streaming software instead of trying to send your audio and video directly to, say, Facebook inside a web browser, because these softwares are built to be an efficient and flexible middleman between you and the internet. And they allow you to record video files directly to your computer, which is how I record clips for YouTube videos and how I test to make sure that my live stream looks and sounds the way I want it to prior to actually going live. The only two I have used, thus the only two I can recommend, are the Elgato Game Capture HD software and the OBS or Open Broadcaster software. Both I will link below. Both are available on Mac and PC. Both are free. Both have their strengths and weaknesses. I use Elgato to record clips for YouTube to my hard drive and OBS to do all my streaming. Let me tell you why. So here's Elgato. This software performs very well with Elgato products like the Elgato Cam Link and the Elgato Game Capture Card. I use this software to record all of my clips for YouTube to my hard drive because the video maintains a high frame rate and is very crisp, but its audio processing has its limits. Elgato can only pick up audio in stereo when it's coming from a video source, as you can see here. But for us to be able to plug in multiple instruments and mix them on the way to the computer, we have to send them into this live commentary audio input channel, which as you can see here is restricted to mono. But on the plus side, this software can interface with your USB device to choose whatever input channel that you want. Now, given that Elgato does register stereo audio from your video sources, theoretically you could mix your audio together into a stereo channel and send that audio into your DSLR camera with a headphone jack, much like you would do with an external camera microphone that you would mount on the top. Potentially then your camera would pass that stereo signal to Elgato. Again, this is theoretically possible, but I haven't messed around with it with fear of overloading that mic input or losing some audio fidelity along the way. If you're curious to see this tested, let me know in the comments and I'll try it out for you. So if you have Elgato products, you don't mind streaming in mono, or you're primarily recording video clips to your computer for YouTubing, Elgato Game Capture HD is a great option. But let's jump over to OBS. Now, I stream exclusively with OBS because it's fully customizable and can broadcast in stereo. Simply set up an audio source here and tell the software what device it's coming from. However, the limitation comes with not being able to choose which input channels from your USB device are feeding into OBS the way that Elgato can. Let me explain what I mean. A USB cable can deliver, I think, 32 isolated audio tracks into your computer via different connection pins inside the USB. My Behringer has 18 channels which I can choose from inside the Elgato software, but when you set up an audio source in OBS, it defaults and is restricted to only looking at pins 1 and 2 coming from your USB. So on your audio interface or digital mixer side of things, that means that OBS is only going to look at whatever's plugged into inputs 1 and 2. So if you're sending a fully completed stereo mix into your audio interface on channels 1 and 2, or you have a simple setup where, say, you have one mic plugged into input 1 and one guitar plugged into input 2, this shouldn't be too much trouble. So now that we're aware of our streaming limitations, let me take you through the full setup / signal chain for the simplest, easiest way to get started with both softwares. First, Elgato. Again, Elgato runs in mono, but if you just have one nice mic and you want to sit in your bedroom, play guitar and sing and just send it all into that one microphone, just plug that microphone into input 1, choose the appropriate input source and channel in the live commentary audio input section in Elgato, activate your commentary, mute the audio monitoring so you don't get a duplicate signal or any feedback, and you're good to go. If you would like to monitor your audio inside a pair of headphones to make sure you know what everything sounds like, plug in your headphones to the headphone jack on your digital mixer or audio interface and simply send a signal from channel 1 to your headphones. You don't want to monitor your audio after it hits Elgato because there's a huge delay in the software trying to process that audio and send it back to you. That's why I muted it earlier. But don't worry, the delay is only for audio monitoring. You won't have this transmitted into your live stream if you follow these steps. Now, if this is too complicated, not working right away, or you don't have any headphones, simply do a test recording to your computer. Streaming software send the same audio and video signals to clips being recorded as they do to the live stream. So you can be sure that this test video recording is a one-to-one representation of what your video will look and sound like via stream. Although your stream may lose some fidelity due to the fact of having to upload all this data to the internet. Now, if you're using the analog mixer to audio interface to computer signal chain, and you can pre-mix all of your instruments into a stereo signal before it hits the audio interface. Simply run that stereo signal into inputs 1 and 2 on your USB enabled device, open up OBS, make a stereo audio input signal source, and you should see your audio coming through. The same headphone monitoring strategies apply here, except in this case, you're sending inputs 1 and 2 to your headphones or monitor speakers. Now, if you have a very simple setup where you just run, say, a vocal mic into input 1 and a guitar into input 2, simply go into advanced settings on your audio source and click mono. This should blend inputs 1 and 2 into a single mono signal. So there you go. That's the simplest way to get up and running with high quality live streaming audio. With these very simple methods, your audio would be pretty raw, but it will still be clean and full, and a big step up from, say, using your iPhone microphone. Now, for the rest of the video, we'll be talking about some more advanced techniques that are only applicable to folks with digital mixers. And these techniques will be especially applicative to anyone using the Behringer X series line of digital mixers, because that's what I have, and I'll be demoing these advanced techniques on. So feel free to take off if you already found what you need, but please, before you go, like the video if it was helpful. Please subscribe to support the channel and to get more tutorials, music, live streams, and other stuff. Also, if you want to say hi or have any more detailed questions about your specific setup, make sure to ask them down in the comments below and I will respond. Okay, digital mixers enable 2 extra bits of functionality that I absolutely love. The first is having an all-in-one device that can take in a bunch of instruments, mix them together in set levels, and then still easily send it to your streaming feed, all in one package. And the other is being able to use a digital audio workstation, or DAW, to mix all of your audio, add effects, compression, other plugins and such before you send that full mix to a streaming feed. So let me show you both options with my rig. So if you don't have a DAW such as GarageBand, Logic Pro, Pro Tools, or you simply don't want to use one, I'll show you how to do everything from your mixer. It's not the cleanest or the most sophisticated method, but it definitely works. Essentially, we will be custom mixing all of our instruments into 2 new channels that will serve as our stereo left and right. Then we'll be sending that stereo signal back into inputs 1 and 2 to be picked up by your streaming software. So plug in all of your instruments, leave inputs 1 and 2 wide open, then go over to your mixer. In my case, I'm using the computer mixer interface for the Behringer XR18. On your mixer, create 2 buses that will serve as your left and right stereo audio. Find the output ports of those buses. In my case, it's aux 1 and 2. Use a cable to send those buses straight back into inputs 1 and 2, and your streaming software will be able to pick up that stereo mix that you've created. If you'd like to run a mono signal into the Elgato software, it's even easier. Simply do all the same steps, but feed all of your instruments into a single bus that you will reroute into input 1 on your mixer. Now, anytime you're looping a signal like this by taking it out of the device and then sending it back into the same device, we need to be really careful that we don't create any feedback loops. So make sure that you're not sending any signal from inputs 1 and 2 to your buses that we just created, because those signal pathways are being fed back into inputs 1 and 2. So if then they get sent back to the bus, there's your feedback loop. What you can do is monitor your fully finished stereo mix by sending inputs 1 and 2 to your headphone monitor or your monitor speakers. But whatever you do, don't send 1 and 2 to those mix buses you just made. Okay, so the second option is for those who are capable of using a DAW. In my case, I use Logic Pro. This option is a little more elegant and it avoids having to hardline 2 of your outputs back into the inputs 1 and 2 on your mixer. The only pitfall is that some digital mixers may not have this full capability, but let's try it out. Here again, we leave inputs 1 and 2 wide open. Feed all of your instruments into your mixer. Leave all of the faders down. Simply set your gains to get the incoming instrument signals where you want them, and then jump over to your DAW. So here I am in Logic Pro with my input for my Nord and 1 microphone. Use your software to mix audio, add effects and plugins, or use MIDI instruments. Then once you're satisfied with your setup, make sure everything is going to your stereo output, which it should be by default. Also by default, the stereo output should be sent to your mixer via USB pins 1 and 2. But if you're not sure, just double check your in-out assignment settings. So now your audio is running from your instruments into your mixer, then to your computer via USB, through all of your plugins inside the DAW, and then back to your mixer on those stereo output pins 1 and 2. Same headphone monitoring applies here. Send inputs 1 and 2 to your headphone monitor or monitor speakers, but make sure they are not picked up by your DAW. If they are, your DAW will then send that signal back to 1 and 2, creating a feedback loop. So now we have registered inputs on channel 1 and 2 of your mixer, which can be picked up by your streaming software and live streamed to your fans. Then if we go over to OBS, the signal will be picked up as a stereo signal to head out to the internet. This method also has the added advantage of mixing stereo pans inside of your DAW, which allows you to create a lovely 3D soundscape with just a few simple clicks. So that's my favorite method and the one I now use for both YouTube and streaming. Unfortunately, I can't take you through the exact steps that pertain to your equipment, but hopefully the principles are universal enough that you can apply it to your rig. And if you do have any detailed questions specific to your setup, ask them down below in the comments and I would be happy to answer them. So hopefully this will get you up and running with a professional sounding live stream so that you can perform with ease from quarantine for all your fans. Thank you for watching, and again, if this video helped out, make sure to hit the like button, say hi down in the comments, and subscribe to support the channel and for more tutorials, music, live streams, and other great things from Pretty Beggar. Peace.